Hey superstars, welcome to the Get Rich Without Being a Bitch podcast, and I am your host Vanessa Shaw for this journey. We're going to be challenging some stereotypes, shattering glass ceilings, really looking at what it takes to live richly and to design a business that's going to support the life that you really want to be living. I'm going to be sharing lots of tips, tools, and strategies along the way, and I can't wait for you to join me on this journey. Hey superstars, welcome back to another episode of Get Rich Without Being a Bitch. And we've been going through this little mini training series of some key frameworks and tools that you will need to take your law firm to the next level. One of my favorite tools that I've been using now for actually 5 years, and we've been using with clients, is called the Kolbe A Index. And I stumbled across this because I'd gone to a seminar and they were talking about it and how they used it with other entrepreneurs. And I, of course, got intrigued by it. It actually was created by an incredible woman called Kolbe, and it was very much her life's work. She regrettably just passed away. I mean, she was working right till the end of her life and she dedicated it to creating these tools. So it's probably about 50 years, 45, 50 years, if I'm not mistaken. So the part of the fascination with this, and listen, I've used a whole load of, different personality tools and things over the years and emotional intelligence tools. But the thing that got me really fascinated about Kolbe was how accurate it really is, and like the insights that it gave me into my own behavior. And that was somebody that had been studying this for a long time. It gave me some really new ahas. And then also how applicable it is to teams and building high-performing teams. So one of the things that Kolbe measures, and I'm not going to get too technical here. Again, I'd always encourage you, if you want to learn about your own Kolbe, frankly, reach out to me. And I'd be happy to share more and even run one for you. It's just a great way to experience it firsthand. But what Kolbe is basically saying is that whenever you are striving to achieve something, so you're committed to taking action, right? It's all about when you get into action, you will always have the same way of going into action to be able to advance. So for some people, there are 4 different action modes. They're called your MO, all put together. And the first one is about fact finding, right? It's about how you get data and, find out all the facts and the details of things. So it's the fact finder. The second action area is follow through. Follow through is all about how you organize and sort, right? The third area is what's called quick start. This is all about your ability to be comfortable with, risk and innovating and experimentation. And then the fourth action mode is called Implementor. It is not implementation. Sometimes people mistakenly understand that it's about implementation, like execution. It's about how you use space and frankly, the tangible tools. Right. So we tend not to have many people in our world that lead with that because that's tended to be, from my experience, people that might be perhaps more architects, right? We had somebody they built warehouse solutions and he happened to be like really leading with that. It's like he always needed his tools and a way to organize the space and to then visualize it and kind of put it all together. That being said, for me, once I started to understand, now I'm a quick start. I'm actually, that everything is scored on a level of, 0 to 10. I'm a 9 quick start, right? So pretty high. And anybody that knows me now, we joke that, Vanessa's unleashing her quick start. This is how I get into action. I'm happy to experiment. I'm fairly comfortable with, certain risks and uncertainty, right? I love to innovate. I love to brainstorm things. So sometimes though, my quick start, if it's not balanced by some really good follow through, which is the systems, right? And organization, I'm at a halfway point there. I score a 5 on that. It means I can create some chaos, right? And team members can also hear me ideating about things and then naturally think that we've got to that's what we're doing. We're executing on it. And they could be like, when is this happening? This is something else new here, right? Doesn't mean to say that we're necessarily implementing things. But the more I started to understand more about my own MO, I could also see that as a leader, I was not setting up my team for success. So in the past, I have had, office managers that were very high on fact finding. So they would lead with fact finding and then follow through. So they needed to have all of the information. They then needed to have the time to thoughtfully kind of create the system and organize it before they were then doing the next things. And because I didn't understand fully how I was operating and how they were operating and those distinctions, I was kind of expecting them to jump in the same way as me, right? That was my frame of reference. And when they would ask questions, clarifying questions, honestly, I would find it irritating. I'm just going to be very honest. There was a time I was like, really? Like, how have I not been clear? Why do you need so much information? It honestly felt like they were trying to slow me down. And what I realized was not that at all. They were wanting to support me. Right? But I'm in my quick start. I don't have the need for as much information. My fact finder again is on a 5. So if I was an 8 or a 9, I would need a lot more, information in order to advance on something. But I'm kind of like, I get enough. And then I'm always back to, well, I can get more if I need it later, right? Whereas the high fact finder is really trying to get that data to get started. And once I realized that, oh no, they're trying to help me, this is how they get into action. It's by having all those, clarifications, asking the questions. They need to go through that process and get it organized. And then everything would flow from there. It was a huge aha for me. Huge. It also meant then that I could train my team on our different styles, what I needed communication-wise as well, and what they needed communication-wise. It meant that instead of being irritated and getting impatient when there were questions, I started to adjust my style to be a little bit more thorough in the information that I was providing. So a little bit more upfront, for example, and more than I was possibly comfortable with in the early days, right? But sharing, and then also making sure that they had time to, ask those questions and to really check that they were good and on board before moving ahead. And then making sure that they had the time and space as well to then behind the scenes go off and, organize it, build the system, map it out, put the plan together. Everything was actually designed perfectly, but I needed to know what the different styles were. Equally so, they had to know about me that, my style could be brainstorming and thinking out aloud. I find that very energizing. But it didn't mean to say that we were implementing things. Sometimes it was just riffing on something, or in my head, it was already an idea for next year or, the end of the year. But again, I needed to be able to clarify that. And so having a tool like this has been huge, because what we've been able to do with it is really understand deeper sense of self. I laugh because I find myself in my Kolbe, and I can just see it when I'm like, oh, I'm totally in my quick start right now. I look at my creative process. I wish, isn't it funny how we say that? Sometimes we kind of wish we had a different style. My creative process is messy. It's actually probably perfect, of course. It's perfectly aligned with my 9 quick start. But, I start writing down ideas. I'll have Post-it notes. I'm ideating. I'm brainstorming. And I used to actually judge myself an awful lot for that and kind of expect that I could be beautifully organized and very, methodical in my creative process. And frankly, I've had to embrace that is my creative process. And now that I can see it, I don't get as frustrated with myself, right? I can see, oh no, that's exactly how I start to do things and approach it. And then it always comes together, right? Because then I'm going to make sure that either I have to make sure I've got the system and that follow through, or guess what? I make sure that I'm hiring the people that have those complementary natural skill sets. Because when we operate outside of our natural MO, especially for long periods of time, it is draining. right? This is totally linked to energy. So again, if I'm not in that space of that quick start and I'm not able to honor that, of course, I can't be there all day long, right? But if I'm not able to honor that part of me, this is where like I start to feel very bland. I'm drained in energy. Again, an example for me would be if I had to do a lot of research and a lot of detailed work, like it's not that I can't do it, right? I can, but it takes me a lot more energy and it's very draining. So understanding Kolbe has just been so great in understanding then how we build teams. Because now when I'm hiring and I've created my role and those areas of responsibility in the job description, we put together what's called a Kolbe C. So we design what we want through the Kolbe C. And then when I've got my shortlist, I can match to see how close they are, right? And it really helps put some really good safety nets in place. I've certainly done this where I liked somebody and hired them because I liked them and, skipped steps in my own interview process and didn't run things like the Kolbe. And we have to make adjustments. If all of a sudden we really like somebody, but their Kolbe is showing up differently, it doesn't mean to say that you wouldn't hire them. Sometimes we do make recommendations that it's so far off. You've either got to adjust the role or, is this person likely to get really frustrated? Because that's what it causes, right? For the person, we're just expecting them to go outside of their MO and against their natural MO for too much of the role. It really causes strain and stress. And again, then understanding how we all work together and fit together as a team. We don't want to be cloning ourselves. For most of us, it would be the worst thing that we could do, right? It really would. We want to be bringing in those different skill sets. So it's also a way that we can start to look at team and as we're building it to see where are the holes, right? Where are those gaps that we could lean into somebody else for? So going back to one of my previous office managers, on where I'm a 9 quick start, she was something like a 1 or a 2. So she's on the other end of the scale, which means she was very risk averse. And until I really understood what that meant, again, that was where I sometimes felt like, oh, wow, she feels like a bit of a Debbie Downer at times. And it's these questions and feels like she's putting the brakes on. But when we look at things through the lens of Kolbe, we realize that everything are strengths, right? They're all strengths on these different, levels between the 0 to 10. And in fact, it was really excellent that she was risk averse because she would start to ask tougher questions. And what I would start to do is I'm not naturally going to go right to the drawbacks of something, not as a 9. So I could use her to say, hey, I want you now to really poke holes in this, like pick it to bits. Like, this is what I'm thinking. Like really use those strengths of being more risk averse and like bring them to the table so that we've got something that is more well thought through. So I said, there's so many different ways of understanding one another. It's important to know that this isn't something that we can necessarily guess as well. I've run the Kolbe on my own kids and there've been surprises, things that I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting, right? We really are wired differently and I wouldn't know that. But once we've got that information, it doesn't change. And that's what's so good. So part of the work of Kathy Kolbe, and I think the beautiful legacy that she's leaving behind is she was so about being unapologetically you. Like, let's really embrace, right, who we are. Let's operate, right, from our MOs as well, because it's going to be more energizing. Let's make sure that we're creating cultures where others as well, right, can be really embracing who they naturally are. And then we build a lot stronger, more cohesive and higher performing teams. So anyway, if this has been helpful, I would encourage you to reach out. You can also check out the website of the main Kolbe if you want to find out more about it. We are Kolbe certified. I am personally Kolbe certified. So it's one of the tools that we use inside the Business Growth Academy, if that is something you're interested in for teams. And I'll make sure I've got the link to it in the show notes because it really is a fascinating tool. And the one thing that everybody has always said across the board is once they've taken it, they're just like, yeah, this is me. And it's like, yeah, it is you. It's, very highly accurate. It has, stood the test of, many, many validation studies. And I think the other thing to say about it as well is it can be legally used as part of the hiring process.